everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Performance Cafe. It's lovely to have you in the cafe with us today, and we are starting a new topic. And I'd like to thank our listeners and our viewers on our podcast and on our YouTube who asked us for the following topic. And the topic is resilience. And I was actually very excited about this because I think it's one of those terms that we throw around, but I'm not quite sure that we know where it's coming from. So today we're going to take a look at what resilience is and what resilience is not. And I'd like to take a couple of minutes just to take a look at like a blast from the past. I would like you to imagine someone that you think is resilient. And very often, especially some of us in, more sort of paternalistic cultures, we would think of someone who is strong, who has grit, who doesn't bend, who doesn't break, who has resolve. I think of all those lovely cowboy movies my father used to watch when I was young. And I sometimes think that, that's what we still think of resilience as. And there are a couple of things about that kind of resilience that is slightly outdated. Firstly, resilience was seen as an individual trait only. So it was about that one individual is resilient, that cowboy is resilient, that this is a person who, separate from everything else, has become or was born resilient. It denied the social, the cultural, and the environmental factors that actually would help someone or who would contribute towards someone's resilience or even the lack thereof. Next up, it was also seen as resilience is about bouncing back, right? It's about coming to a previous state after facing adversity. If we think about it, it's like with COVID, everyone wanted to go back to normal. Well, did we really ever get back to normal? We got back to maybe a state of equilibrium, but we had in that process also adapted, we had learned, we had grown, and therefore actually potentially we bounced forward, right? We didn't bounce back. The third thing was resilience was seen as endurance alone. So it was about, I'm just going to grin and bear it. I'm just going to like knuckle down and do it. But actually, resilience is not about sort of pushing away what's happening. It's actually the ability to have emotional flexibility, to adapt, to seek support. And so resilient individuals aren't just tough, but they're actually also likely to recognize their vulnerabilities. They're going to speak freely about their emotions. They're going to ask others for help. And that is why emotional intelligence is such an important component that, those old-time movies, those old-time cowboys weren't allowed to have. Lastly, resilience was seen as a fixed trait. You are, you aren't, right? You were born that way, not you could grow into it. And I think anyone who's been around life a little while, I certainly can speak for myself, you have to face the adversity. You have to be in places where you feel discomfort, where you feel out of control in order to really get that resilience. And therefore, it should be able to be sort of like grown over time as you acknowledge pain, as you acknowledge struggle, as you deal with yourself with courage and compassion and adaptability. So, if that's what we think of, or if that's what we used to think about resilience, we can see that it's not just about grinning and bearing, about being the strong one, about going it alone, about riding off into the sunset on your horse, after conquering this. In fact, there are a couple of writers who specifically tell us that's not what it is about. If we think about Brené Brown's approach to resilience, she really leans into vulnerability, cultivating authenticity, creating connection between people, and really understanding how shame and fear might be, part of what is playing into this. And so from that perspective, she's really brought this concept of the opposite of courage is vulnerability. You know, we've got, if we understand vulnerability, we can breed our courage, right? We can become courageous and resilient. If we take a look at Sheryl Sandberg's approach to resilience, hers is very much around being open to understanding that resilience is dependent on understanding grief, human psychology, practical insights and strategies on how do I actually get through this, not just grin and bear it, but what are those steps that I take? And in one of our future videos, I'm definitely going to be talking about a couple of tools, including hers, on how she was resilient, specifically related to her book Option B, where she speaks about the turn her life took when her husband very suddenly passed away and the impact that had on her, and how she went on to build resilience and find joy in her life once again. So if we know what resilience is not, and we now understand that it's about actually being open to this emotional vulnerability, and understanding how we're going to go forward using courage, compassion, and to reinforce our resilience, let's take a look at what resilience is. And I like to find a good metaphor, as those of you who have watched the channel before would know. And for me, the great metaphor for resilience is a really old tree. And in one of our previous episodes or series, we took a look at personal development. And what I did there, and you certainly don't need to watch that to understand these videos, but just to give you a bit of background, I looked at personal development as a pond. And if this pond is stagnant and not going anywhere, it adds no value. It can't grow. It can't give life to new things and that kind of thing. And next to the stagnant pond, once the pond isn't stagnant anymore, then it's filled with fresh water, with fresh life, and it will have a lot of trees and plants growing around it. So I'd like you to imagine that next to our now not stagnant pond, we've got this beautiful old tree. And the reason for the tree is that if we take a look at old trees, they might be slightly gnarled. They might have had to bend in the wind. They might have, been struck by lightning and had to carry on growing around it. But like that tree's ability to either sway in the wind or to come back with new leaves, new shoots, new branches. In a similar way, we need to sway with the wind, and we need to endure storms without snapping. And resilience is what we're going to use to do that, to withstand the adversity, to bounce back from setbacks, bounce forward, as we've heard, and adapt to challenging circumstances without losing our core strength or our integrity. And so let's take a look at this metaphor in this tree, and why does this tree symbolize it so well? So firstly, there's the flexibility and the adaptability, right? It's really great to say, something must be strong, but actually the strongest things can just be snapped, right? The stronger something is, often the less flexible it is. And the problem is that if we're not flexible, we cannot adapt to something that is new. If we take a look at COVID, and I had so many people that I was coaching at that time that really went like, I can't accept this. I can't work. I can't accept that I have to sit and work from home. I can't accept that I can't go to the office and be amongst my colleagues. I can't accept that I have to work from home and, help my child with their schooling. I understand this. I'm not saying that they should have just taken to this like a duck to water. But what was important is that the people who got through that were those who could see this obstacle and then build a strategy, a perspective, or a behavior that helped them to navigate that circumstance. And they learned to overcome the obstacles to some extent that some people now, after COVID, didn't land up going back to work. Actually didn't land up sending their kids back to school, but continued to homeschool them. Who had decided to go on actually entirely different career paths because what they had learned in that process was so valuable. So the first part to look at is the flexibility and adaptability that I need in order to adjust to the circumstance. Does that mean that I should just blow over and change every time a stiff wind blows over me? Absolutely not. We know that good old solid trees are rooted and they are stable. They believe that they use those roots to ground them. And in the same way as resilient individuals, we can draw strength from our internal resources, maybe a belief system, a value system, our support system. I have recently had a really interesting time where just a whole bunch of people who I coach, all these clients were in a situation where they lost what I like to call their tribe. There's lots of research about it. I think Adam Grant has written a book about it as well. I think that's one of the books I did read about it. But where people lost the people around them and therefore battled to cope because they couldn't root in themselves, and then they did not have a support system to provide that stability, that foundation to face the adversity. So we need to find our roots. And then also, trees, they endure, they persist, right? And so weather conditions come and go, storms and droughts, harsh winters, hot summers like we've just had in South Africa, they continue to batter the tree. And the tree might not be pretty. The tree might not be picture perfect, like on those Hallmark cards. It's gnarled and it's got branches coming out at weird angles, but it continues to grow and it continues to thrive. And the lovely imagery there is that, where there is like a knot in the tree, it actually shows this is a little visual representation of resilience, where I've overcome something, where I was so strong that I came back. When you've hurt yourself and you've got a scar, we often wish the scar wasn't there. But each scar shows resilience. I always say each wrinkle on my face shows resilience. It shows what I had to get through, right? And so every time that we endure and we persist, we have shown resolve and maybe even a little bit of optimism when facing significant challenges or setbacks. I'm not saying they were easy to get through. That's the whole point. Resilience doesn't make it easier to get through this. It just provides the roadmap so that you can get through it. And then in future, when faced with a similar problem, you have already got a roadmap of something similar to get through. And then, of course, renewal and growth. After the storm passes, after that adversity has come and gone, there's, as I said, new leaves, new branches. And this is the capacity to not only weather the storm, but bounce back stronger and more resilient. And I love the example of the protea, which is the national flower of South Africa. We have a variety of them. They are all incredibly beautiful. But the fun fact about the protea is that it needs fire for the seeds to germinate. And so while we want to stop fires, we want to stop that adversity. In the example of the protea, if there is no fire, there can be no renewal. There can be no growth. And so for me, I think of it that way, that yes, this thing is difficult right now, right? It's hard to do, but I will come through it with newfound strength, wisdom, and resilience. And those will be my new seeds, my new flowers, and my new leaves. So overall, we can learn so much from nature, from our team, from our tree, from our protea, about understanding resilience and being flexible, adaptable, stable, showing endurance, persisting, renewing, and growth. And those are all central to the concept of resilience. I'm going to leave you there with resilience today, but in the next video, we're going to touch a bit on emotional intelligence. How does that work with resilience? how not only does it make us more resilient, but how does it help us make other people more resilient? As always, if you've enjoyed this episode, this will go up on our website, Perform Forward, where it will feature as a blog. There will be podcasts available on it, and we would love to hear from you what you think about resilience. What part of resilience would you like us maybe to explore a little bit more? And of course, you can find us on all social media channels. Leave us a comment on any of those, and we will get back to you. But then, until the next time we speak resilience, I'm going to go and find it in my cup of coffee, and I hope to see you next time at the Performance Cafe.